It was a regular morning, just like any other. I packed my son's lunch and gave him a hug before he left for school. My fiancé, Aaron, was already busy on his phone, focused on work. I kissed him goodbye and went on with my day, not thinking much of it. Everything felt completely normal. Around midday, my phone buzzed. It was a message from a friend, and she sounded worried. She asked if I'd heard what was happening at the school. At first, I thought it couldn't be anything serious. But as I read more, one word jumped out at me over and over. Fire. My heart started to race. My son's school was on fire. I tried calling Aaron right away, but he didn't answer. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my keys and rushed to the car. My mind filled with images of my son's face, his little hands, his bright smile. I sped toward the school, my stomach in knots. When I arrived, there was smoke everywhere. People were gathered around, shouting, desperate for news of their children. I pushed through the crowd, searching for Aaron and hoping to see our son with him, safe and sound. Then, I saw Aaron. He was running out of the building, holding a small child. For a moment, relief flooded through me. But then I looked closer and realized the child in his arms wasn't our son. I stood there, frozen, as Aaron came closer, carrying that boy. My heart dropped. It was his ex's son, the child of the woman he once loved. My son was still inside. I ran up to him, barely able to get the words out. "Where's our son?" I asked, my voice trembling. Aaron looked at me, and for a moment, he seemed lost, like he didn't understand the question. Then he glanced back toward the burning building. I couldn't find him," he said, almost in a whisper. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at him in disbelief. He went in. But he came out with another child, not ours. I felt anger and fear rise up inside me. How could he leave our son behind? How could he save his ex's child over his own? People around us were shouting, and firefighters were going in and out of the building. I didn't wait. I turned and ran toward the building, my mind focused on one thing, finding my son. As I ran toward the entrance, a firefighter stopped me. "You can't go in. It's too dangerous," he shouted, his face serious, blocking my way. But I couldn't just stand there. My son was inside. I tried to push past him, desperate to get through, but he held firm. "We're doing everything we can to get everyone out safely," he said, his voice softer, trying to calm me. I could barely hear him over the roaring flames and the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. I looked around, frantic, searching the faces of kids coming out, hoping that maybe, just maybe, I'd see my son walking out with them. But he wasn't there. More firefighters ran past me, and the crowd around was crying, calling out names, their faces filled with fear. Then I saw Aaron standing off to the side, holding the boy he'd saved. He looked helpless, lost, and guilty. I wanted to scream at him, to demand an answer. Why didn't he save our son? But my focus was still on finding my child. I couldn't waste any more time. I just wanted my son safe in my arms. With every passing minute, the fear and panic inside me grew stronger. I moved back to where Aaron was standing, hoping he could tell me something, anything, about our son. "Aaron," I said, my voice shaking, "why didn't you bring him out? Why didn't you save our son?" My words were filled with desperation and hurt. He looked at me, his face pale, and stammered. I thought he was closer. I saw him and I thought he'd be fine. I didn't think." "You didn't think?" I whispered, anger boiling up inside me. My heart felt like it was breaking. The child he'd saved looked up at us, unaware of the tension and pain between us. "Aaron, he's your son. You left him in there." I couldn't understand how he'd made that choice. Just then, another firefighter emerged from the smoke, carrying a child in his arms. My breath caught. I rushed forward, praying it was him, that he was safe. I held my breath as the firefighter came closer, cradling the small, soot-covered figure. It was my son. Relief washed over me, and I ran to him, barely able to hold back tears. The firefighter handed him to me, and I wrapped my arms around him, feeling his tiny heartbeat against me. He was shaken, coughing from the smoke, but he was alive. I whispered, "I'm here. I've got you now. You're safe." I looked over at Aaron, expecting to see relief or joy in his face. But he just stood there watching us from a distance, his expression unreadable. The boy he'd saved was by his side, clinging to him. In that moment it hit me. He didn't rush in for our son because, deep down, he couldn't let go of his past. He chose someone else's child over his own, and I couldn't unsee it or pretend it didn't happen. My relief was slowly replaced by a sense of betrayal. I held my son tighter, feeling a mix of gratitude for his safety and a growing pain in my heart over the man I thought I knew. As the chaos around us settled, I knew I couldn't stay silent. I walked over to Aaron, my son still in my arms, and looked him straight in the eyes. "How could you?" I whispered, my voice filled with hurt and disbelief. "How could you save him and leave our son behind?" Aaron's face fell. He opened his mouth to say something, but seemed to struggle to find the words. Finally, he muttered, "I didn't think. I saw him and I thought I could help. I thought." "You thought?" I cut him off, my voice sharper than I intended. "Our son could have died, Aaron. He could have been left in there alone while you saved someone else's child." His gaze dropped and he shook his head. I know it was wrong. I panicked." He looked at me with pleading eyes. "I didn't mean to hurt you or him. I didn't mean for any of this." I wanted to believe him, but his words felt hollow. The hurt went too deep, and trust felt like a distant memory. I just stared at him, unsure of what to say next, feeling the weight of his choice pressing down on me. The ride home was quiet, filled with a thick, uncomfortable silence. My son sat in the back seat, drifting in and out of sleep, exhausted from the day. Aaron was beside me in the passenger seat, staring out the window, his face a mixture of guilt and sadness. I wanted to say something, to let out the storm of emotions building up inside me, but I held back. I knew that once I started, I might not be able to stop. Questions swirled in my mind. Did he regret it? Did he realize what he'd done to us? When we finally pulled into the driveway, Aaron turned to me, his eyes pleading. "I know I messed up," he whispered. "I'll make it up to you, to him, I promise. Please, don't let this be the end." I looked at him, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Part of me wanted to forgive him, to believe it was a mistake. But another part of me, the part that felt shattered and betrayed, wasn't so sure. Without answering, I got out of the car, gently lifting our son in my arms and heading inside, leaving Aaron alone in the driveway, unsure of what our future held. That night, after putting my son to bed, I sat alone in the quiet house, replaying everything in my mind. Aaron was somewhere in the other room, giving me space, as if he knew that words wouldn't fix what had happened. I thought about the years we'd been together, the life we'd built, and the future we'd imagined, and yet in a single moment, he'd shattered my trust. I could forgive a lot of things, but how could I forget this? How could I live with the thought that, in a moment of fear, he hadn't chosen us? Finally, I went to find him, sitting in the dimly lit kitchen, his head in his hands. He looked up as I walked in, his face filled with regret. "I don't know how we're supposed to move past this," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I need time, Aaron. I need to understand if we can ever truly be a family again." He nodded, not arguing, just accepting. "I'll do whatever it takes," he whispered, "even if that means giving you all the space you need." We sat in silence, knowing that we were standing on the edge, uncertain if we'd find our way back to each other, or if this was the beginning of the end. In the days that followed, Aaron moved into the guest room, respecting the space I needed. Life felt fragile, like it could shatter with one wrong move. We stayed civil, careful around each other, but a part of me wondered if things would ever feel normal again. He tried to make it up in small ways, helping more around the house, spending extra time with our son, doing his best to be the father he hadn't been that day. But every time I looked at him, the memory of the fire came rushing back. The image of him carrying someone else's child instead of our own played over and over in my mind. One night, he finally asked, "Do you think we can get past this? Do you think you could forgive me?" I looked at him, searching for some reassurance, some sign that this wasn't the man he truly was. "I want to believe we can," I replied honestly, "but it'll take time. I need to see that you're here for us, and only us." He nodded, accepting the slow path to rebuilding what was lost. For now, we'd stay in this place of uncertainty, taking it one day at a time, and maybe, just maybe, there was a chance we could heal. Weeks passed, and slowly, the rawness of that day began to fade. Aaron remained patient, giving me space, but always being present for our family. He didn't push or demand forgiveness. Instead, he allowed time to do its work. One evening, as I watched him read a bedtime story to our son, I felt a small, fragile sense of hope. There, In that quiet moment, I saw the man I'd fallen in love with. The pain and betrayal were still there, lingering like shadows, but a new layer of understanding and acceptance had started to grow. After our son fell asleep, Aaron joined me in the living room. For the first time in a long while, I looked at him without resentment, without anger, just as a partner who had made a terrible mistake. "I think I'm ready to start moving forward," I said softly, breaking the silence. "It won't be easy, and I won't forget what happened, but I want us to try." Relief washed over his face as he reached for my hand, holding it gently. "I promise I'll do everything to make this right," he replied. "I'm here for you, for our son, for as long as it takes." In that moment, I knew we still had a long way to go, but we had taken the first real step toward healing. And maybe, with time, trust could be rebuilt. Together, we could start again, one day at a time. In the months that followed, Aaron and I worked to rebuild the trust that had been broken. It wasn't easy. There were days when the memory of the fire, of his choice, resurfaced, filling me with doubt. But on those days, Aaron showed up for us in ways he hadn't before. He became more present, more attentive, and in his quiet, patient way, he continued to earn back the trust I'd lost. One evening, as we sat together after putting our son to bed, Aaron turned to me and said, "I know I can't change the past, but I want you to know how much I regret what I did. I don't ever want you to feel second to anyone again." I looked at him, his face earnest and open, and I could see the weight of his guilt. In that moment, I realized we both had to forgive. Not just him, but also myself for the resentment I'd been holding on to. We sat in silence, hand in hand, feeling the warmth of a new beginning. There was still work to be done, and scars that wouldn't fade easily. But we were building something new, a foundation of honesty, forgiveness, and understanding. And perhaps that was enough for now. We had a long journey ahead, but at least we were facing it together. As time passed, our family settled into a new rhythm. The scars from that day remained, but they no longer defined us. Instead, they served as reminders of how fragile trust can be and how hard we had worked to rebuild it. One afternoon, as we watched our son play in the yard, Aaron took my hand and looked at me, a quiet determination in his eyes. "I know I'll never stop proving myself to you," he said, his voice steady. "But I want you to know, I'm here for the long haul, whatever it takes." I squeezed his hand, feeling a warmth that was beginning to feel familiar again. "We'll get there," I replied, a gentle smile spreading across my face. "Together." In that moment, I felt a calmness settle over me. We still had a long way to go, but we were finally facing forward, ready to take on whatever life brought our way. The pain had shaped us, but it didn't define our future. We were stronger for it, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. As the sun set and the day drew to a close, I knew one thing for certain. We had weathered the fire and come out on the other side, not perfect, but together. Months turned into a year, and while the memories of that day never fully faded, they no longer haunted us the way they once did. Aaron and I began to share more open conversations about our fears, our regrets, and the changes we wanted to make, not only as partners, but as individuals. One evening, after we'd tucked our son into bed, Aaron surprised me with a simple but heartfelt question. "What do you want our future to look like?" he asked, his voice gentle but full of sincerity. I thought about it for a moment, realizing how much our journey had shifted my perspective. "I want a life built on honesty," I replied. "I want us to be able to rely on each other completely, no matter what. And I want our son to grow up knowing that we worked hard to give him a home filled with love and trust." Aaron nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I want that too. I want to be the man you and our son can count on, always." In that moment, I felt the final pieces of trust start to settle into place. We weren't just moving on from the past, we were actively creating a future we could be proud of. It felt like a new beginning, grounded in the lessons we had learned and the love we had fought to protect. As we sat together in the quiet, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we were ready to face them, side by side. With each passing day, our family grew stronger. The experience had taught us all the value of resilience, forgiveness, and the power of starting fresh. There were still moments that reminded me of the pain we had gone through, but they no longer held us back. Instead, they reminded us of how far we had come. One weekend, we decided to take a trip to the mountains, a place where we could reconnect and make new memories. As we hiked together, laughing and sharing stories, I realized how much had changed in the past year. The small, joyful moments felt even more precious, like a reward for all we had endured. That evening, as we sat around a campfire, our son fell asleep in my lap. Aaron looked over at me, his eyes reflecting the glow of the flames. "I know we've been through a lot," he said softly, "but I wouldn't trade where we are now for anything. You and our family mean everything to me." I felt a warmth in my chest, the kind of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. "I feel the same," I replied, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. "We've built something real, something lasting." In the quiet of the night, with the stars above us and the firelight flickering, I knew that the past no longer defined us. We had transformed our pain into strength, and together we were creating a future that was unbreakable. As life settled back into its steady rhythm, I found myself looking forward more than I ever had before. The pain of the past had transformed into something new, a reminder of the strength we had built together. One evening, as I watched our son playing in the backyard, Aaron joined me. We stood there in comfortable silence, watching him laugh and run with that innocent joy only children seem to have. Aaron turned to me and smiled, a quiet confidence in his eyes. "You know," he said, "I think everything we went through made us better. I can see it in you, in me, in him." He nodded toward our son, who was looking up at the sky, lost in his own little world. "We're not just a family, we're a team." I leaned into him, feeling a deep sense of peace. "Yes," I replied, "and this team, it's stronger than ever." We stood there together, watching as our son waved at us with a big grin, and in that moment I knew that we had truly left the shadows of the past behind. Our love had been tested, our trust shattered and rebuilt, and now we were finally whole again, ready to face whatever life would bring. The journey wasn't over, it was just beginning, and I knew that, come what may, we would face it together, stronger, wiser, and more grateful than ever. Time continued to pass, and life moved forward. The memories of that dark day grew softer around the edges, no longer sharp but a part of the tapestry of our lives. We had come to accept that those painful moments were chapters in our story, necessary for us to become the family we were now. One evening, as we tucked our son into bed, he looked up at both of us and asked, "Will you always be here, no matter what?" Aaron and I exchanged a look, and he reached out to hold our son's hand. "Always," he promised. "We're not going anywhere." I nodded, feeling my heart swell. "We're here together. That's what family is." As our son drifted off to sleep, we left his room and stood together in the quiet hallway, sharing a look that held all the promises we'd made and kept. Every choice, every hardship, every triumph had brought us here. This was our story, a story of forgiveness, resilience, and love that had been tested but never broken. Together, we walked forward side by side into the next chapter of our lives, grateful for every moment and ready to face whatever came our way. We weren't just surviving anymore, we were living deeply and fully. And that was more than enough. As the years passed, the events of that day became a distant memory, a part of our journey, but no longer a weight we carried. We had built a life grounded in love, trust, and understanding, a life that had been tested in the hardest ways but had emerged unbreakable. One evening, as we celebrated our son's birthday surrounded by friends and family, I took a moment to step back and take it all in. The laughter, the warmth, the love, it was everything we had worked so hard to rebuild. Aaron came up beside me, slipping his hand into mine as we watched our son blow out his candles, his face lit up with joy. "Look at him," Aaron said, his voice soft with pride. "He's happy, and so are we." I looked at Aaron, my heart full. "Yes, we are," I whispered, knowing how far we had come to reach this moment. We had made it, stronger than ever, and I knew we could face whatever the future held. As we stood there, hand in hand, I felt a deep peace settle within me. Our journey had come full circle, not perfect, not without scars, but richer and more beautiful because of it. And as I looked at our son's smiling face, I knew that we had given him the greatest gift of all, a family built on resilience, love, and an unbreakable bond. Our story was no longer one of struggle, but of triumph. A story we would carry forward, together, into whatever the future had in store. As the years continued to pass, our family grew, each chapter adding new layers to our story. we created countless memories. Family vacations, lazy Sunday mornings, and quiet evenings spent together. Those moments became the foundation of a legacy we wanted to pass down to our children. One of love, forgiveness, and resilience. One day, as our son was older and ready to start his own journey, he asked us about our story, about the challenges we'd faced, and the love that kept us together. Aaron and I looked at each other, smiling, knowing that this was the story we had shaped, with all its ups and downs. I told him, "We're here today because we chose to stand by each other, even when it was hard. Love isn't always easy, but it's worth fighting for." Aaron added, "Sometimes you go through difficult times and they test you. But those times can also make you stronger if you're willing to grow together." Our son listened quietly, a look of understanding and admiration in his eyes. It was then I realized that this was the true legacy we'd built, not just for ourselves, but for him as well. We had shown him the strength of love and the beauty of forgiveness, and I hoped he would carry those lessons forward in his own life. As I watched him take in our words, I felt a deep sense of peace. Our story had come full circle, and now it would live on, not just in the life we had built, but in the hearts of the ones we loved. Our journey wasn't just our own, it was a legacy of love that would continue long after us, a reminder that, even in the hardest moments, we had chosen each other. And that choice was the foundation of everything. Years went by and life brought changes, as it always does. Our son grew up, went off to college, and began to build a life of his own. Watching him set out into the world, carrying with him the lessons and values we'd worked so hard to instill, filled me with pride and gratitude. One day, as he returned home for a visit, he brought someone special with him, a young woman he introduced as the person he hoped to spend his life with. As Aaron and I welcomed her, I saw the same look in our son's eyes that I had seen in Aaron's years ago, a look of love, commitment, and hope. As we sat around the dinner table, laughter and warmth filling the room, I realized that the legacy we had created was already living on in ways we hadn't even imagined. Our son had learned to love deeply and truly, to be resilient in the face of challenges, and to value family above all. I saw in him the same strength and courage that had guided Aaron and me through our own journey. Before he left, my son pulled me aside and said, "Thank you for everything. The love you and Dad have shown me, it's something I'll carry with me forever." I smiled, my heart full. "That's all we ever wanted," I replied, knowing that he understood the depth of what we had shared with him. As he left, I turned to Aaron, and we both felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. Our story wasn't just about us anymore. It was part of a larger story, one that would continue through our son and the generations to come. The love, resilience, and commitment we had built were now woven into the fabric of our family, a legacy that would carry on, reminding future generations of the strength found in choosing each other every day. And that was more than enough. As the seasons changed and our lives grew quieter, Aaron and I found ourselves reflecting on the life we had built. The years had given us everything we could have hoped for, a family filled with love, resilience, and an unshakable bond that had weathered the greatest of storms. One afternoon, as we sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Aaron took my hand and looked at me with the same warmth he had all those years ago. "We've lived a good life," he said softly. "I wouldn't trade a single moment." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of contentment. "Me neither," I replied. "Every hardship, every joy, every choice brought us here, to this moment." In that quiet peace, surrounded by memories of a life well lived, we knew we had fulfilled the legacy we had hoped to create. We had taught our children the meaning of love, strength, and family. We had shown them that even in the face of hardship, love was worth fighting for. Our story, once filled with trials and challenges, had become a source of inspiration and guidance for the next generation. We had passed down the best parts of ourselves, knowing that our love and resilience would live on long after we were gone. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we sat hand in hand, knowing that our journey had come full circle. Our story was now part of something bigger, a legacy of love, courage, and unwavering commitment, a gift that would endure through generations. And in that moment, we were truly at peace, content in the knowledge that we had loved deeply, lived fully, and left behind a legacy of strength and love that would carry on forever. As the years continued to pass, Aaron and I found that our roles had shifted. We became not only parents and partners, but also guides, mentors, and storytellers for our family. Our grandchildren often gathered around, their eyes wide with wonder, as we shared the tales of our life together, the struggles, the triumphs, the lessons learned. One evening, as we shared stories by the fire, our eldest grandchild looked at us and asked, "How did you stay together through everything? What made you so strong?" I looked at Aaron, and we shared a knowing smile. "Because we chose each other, every single day," I said gently. "Even when it was hard, even when we were hurt, we always chose to face the challenges together." Aaron added, "Love isn't just about the easy moments. It's about being there through the tough times, holding on, and never letting go of the commitment you made to one another." Our grandchildren listened, their faces filled with admiration and understanding. In that moment, I felt a sense of completion. Our story, once filled with trials, had become a guiding light for the generations that followed. A reminder that love, commitment, and resilience could carry them through anything. As we held each other's hands, I knew that our journey had truly left an imprint, not only on our own hearts, but on the hearts of those who would carry it forward. Our legacy had become a part of them, a legacy of love that would continue to inspire long after we were gone. And in that quiet, precious moment, surrounded by our family, I felt a profound peace, knowing that our story would live on, a testament to the strength of choosing love again and again through all of life's seasons. As the years continued on, Aaron and I spent our days surrounded by the love of our family, watching our children and grandchildren grow, each of them carrying forward a piece of our story. We saw in them the values we had nurtured: strength, kindness, resilience, and most of all, love. One winter evening, as the snow fell softly outside, Aaron and I sat together in our favorite armchairs by the fireplace, holding hands. Our home was quiet, filled with a peaceful warmth and memories of a life lived side by side. Aaron looked at me, his eyes still carrying that familiar spark, the same one I'd fallen in love with so many years ago. "We did it," he whispered, his voice gentle but full of emotion. "We lived a life we can be proud of." I felt tears fill my eyes as I smiled back at him, feeling the weight of every moment we had shared, from the struggles that tested us to the joys that had lifted us. "Yes," I whispered, my voice catching. "We really did." As we sat there, wrapped in each other's warmth, I knew that no matter what happened, our love would continue on. It was in every laugh, every tear, every moment of forgiveness, and every promise we had kept. We had built something that couldn't be broken, something that would remain long after we were gone. In the quiet of that winter night, with Aaron's hand in mine, I felt a deep sense of peace and gratitude. We had loved deeply, weathered every storm, and created a legacy that would carry on in the hearts of those we loved. And as I closed my eyes, I knew that our story was eternal, a love that would live on in the memories of our family forever.